This is Jeff, and this is an audio test for the webinar. If you can hear this, please type in the chat box and let me know. Hey everyone, this is Jeff Hyman. Thank you so much for making the time today. I think it's going to be a great use of time. We were a little bit early. We're about 10 minutes early. Thanks for getting an early start. I want to make sure that audio and video are working. So do me a favor and just type in the chat box, if you would, that you can hear me and see me okay. And we will get started in about 10 minutes. We've got hundreds of people for this webinar today. And so I want to give everyone a chance to join. So please understand, we're probably going to start right on time in about 10 minutes. Good time to grab coffee, water, and we'll get going. But type in the chat box if you can hear and see me okay. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much for your comments. And like I said, we'll get started in about 10 minutes. Good morning or good afternoon. This is Jeff Hyman, and I am so happy that you're able to join me today for this impromptu and pretty unusual webinar. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. I want to give people a chance to join. We have hundreds of people that signed up, so I just want to be fair and give them a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, I'm interested in where you're dialing in from. If you could just type in the chat box and just let me know. Just type whatever city, state, country you're in. I'm always curious to kind of know. And like I said, we'll get started in about 5 minutes. Good morning or good afternoon. This is Jeff Hyman, and we are live, and we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. I want to give everyone a chance to get into the webinar room. I will say that we had way more signups than I expected, hundreds and hundreds. So I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes. We're going to get started right on time in about 4 minutes. In the meantime, good time to grab some water, and we will get started in just a few. In the meantime, let me know where you're calling from. Just type in the chat box, the city, the state, the country, whatever. I'm always curious to know who's joining, and we'll see you in just a few. Good morning or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I'm Jeff Hyman, and we're going to get started in just a moment. I want to do one last audio check, video check, just to make sure that you can hear me okay, that you can see me okay. We're going to cover a lot of stuff. I am going to send you a copy of the deck that I'm going to take you through and the content. I'm also going to send you a copy of the video so that you can share it with your team. I had a few requests this morning where people said, they wanted to share this with their team and their staff. So I'm going to send you a copy as well. So you need not scramble to write everything down, but I am going to make this an interactive discussion. So I want to take your questions as we go. This is obviously a pretty important topic. It's obviously a very crucial time as leaders. And so if you'll type in the chat box as we go, I'll do my best to answer your questions in real time. So please stay with us live. Again, I'm Jeff Hyman. I am based in Chicago, Illinois, and it is a snowy 34 degrees. I am coming to you live and just really put this together over the past couple days over the weekend because I realized I had some knowledge that might be helpful to some of you under ordinary circumstances, but under these quite extraordinary circumstances, I thought that it would be even more helpful to share. So as people are kind of funneling into the room, like I said, we've got hundreds of people joining the webinar, way more than I had expected. I kind of figured a couple dozen, and I was off by a few orders of magnitude. But over the next 59 minutes, I'm going to take you through some things that I think will be really useful for you as leader of your company or leader of your team or leader of an investment fund, whatever it may be. If you've never led your team remotely or virtually or from home, whatever you want to call it, it's really a tale of two cities. I've done it both ways, and it was a big change for me, and I had a big learning curve, and my hope is to help you avoid that learning curve. So with all that, why don't we get started? It's 11:30 Central. It's 12:30 Eastern. Thank you so much for joining, particularly under very unusual and trying circumstances. And, I'm usually not at a loss for words. If you know me personally, you'll know that to be true. But I'm humbled that you would even spend an hour with me on a day like today. The snow is falling here in Chicago, and it's probably an appropriate and somber time. I remain as optimistic as I always am. I'm an entrepreneur, and optimism is what we're all about. But this call is all about you and all about the leader that you are, and the leader that you need to step up now more than ever to become. So I'm going to take you through what I've learned about managing people remotely and at a distance. The good news is it absolutely can be done. So you're in the right place if you find yourself in this situation where you're leading a virtual team, a remote team, maybe for the first time, or you soon will be. And at the same time, you still need to achieve results, right? We all have businesses to run best we can. We all have teams to lead best we can. The future is uncertain in many ways, which I won't recount because I know you watch the news like I do. But I can feel confident, and I hope you do too, particularly as resilient American leaders, that we will get through this period as well. And there's a lot of light on the other side. You can call that faith or optimism or whatever you want to call it, but I certainly feel that, and I hope you do too. And I think just the fact that, hundreds of us are together right now on this webinar talking about how do we go forward as business leaders is hugely important because our people look to us for that. Our families, certainly, our neighbors, but also our teams, our staff, and doing it in a way that they can't see us and touch us, put their arm around us, makes it that much more challenging. So that's why I put together this webinar. And I cannot tell you enough that you can lead your team in this unique way. I'll go so far as to say that you may never go back because it is so liberating in many ways. Now, that may be a stretch or take a leap of faith, but hopefully by the end of the discussion, you'll become a believer that this can be done. But very importantly, before we begin, and like I said, I'm going to send you a copy of all this stuff so you can share it with your teams, because even if you have experience doing it, your direct staff may not have any experience managing people, leading people virtually, remotely. And so we all are going to have to get used to this for the foreseeable future. I think all of us realize that we're not talking about days or weeks anymore. And so this is the new normal. And so the quicker we can adjust to that new normal, the quicker we can refocus, get our people focused, keep their heads straight, and move forward. I promise you that you can do this. But leading people remotely does take a different approach to leading people in a physical environment. I've done both. For the first 10 years or 15 years of my career, I started 3 companies and led them in a physical office environment. And over the past 10 years, flipped and did the opposite and started one company in particular that I'm going to give you some examples from. And it took me a lot of changes. Let me just tell you briefly, just 30 seconds about me, and then we'll get into it. The company I'm referring to is Retrofit, and this was 100% virtual company, 100% remote, covering many states in the U.S. And along the way, I've hired a lot of people. I've led a lot of people. I teach every quarter here in Chicago at the Kellogg School of Management, a course on recruiting and retaining talent. And that's based on the book that I wrote last year, which became a bestseller, called Recruit Rockstars. And I'm certainly happy to send you a copy if you don't have one. And by the way, at the end, I'm going to give you all my personal contact info so that you can follow up with me on anything I can be helpful. So I have done a lot of things right, and I've been very lucky along the way, and I've done a lot of things wrong. And what I'd like to do is hopefully help you avoid some of those mistakes. It can be wonderfully liberating to lead a virtual team because you're forced to let go. It reminds me a little of when my grandfather taught me how to ride a bike, and I felt that pull, that tug, because he didn't want me to tip over. And then when he let go, it just was like the heavens part, and it's just hugely liberating, and I took off. Now, the bad news is he forgot to teach me how to use the brakes. And so I did slam into a tree and have quite a messy situation. But for that time period, it was wonderfully liberating. And so I'm curious, before we get started, if you could type in the chat box, if you are leading people remotely for the first time, just type yes or no. So the question I'm asking is, are you now leading a virtual team for the very first time and you've never done it before? Just type yes. If you've done it before, you could type that as well. And I'm just kind of curious of all the people that are on this call, kind of what is our starting point? So that would be great. And there's a lot of yeses, most yeses, doing it for the first time, which I guess is what I would expect if you're joining us for the hour. Even if you have joined and led people remotely before, maybe I'll give you some ideas. And most of my ideas are going to come from a real life case study called Retrofit. And I'm not going to sell you anything about Retrofit because I don't lead Retrofit anymore. But Retrofit, just to be clear, is a company that I started in 2011 and had the good fortune to raise capital and lead this company. And Retrofit was an online weight loss company, one of the first online wellness companies in the nation. And real briefly, what we did was we paired together a virtual team of dietitians and psychologists, along with the latest wireless tracking technology, specifically the Fitbit and wireless scales, and all this stuff was integrated into an app. And so we helped tens of thousands of people across the country lose 10% of their weight using this online monitoring and this virtual team, which is what we're going to talk about today. And so the reason I'm talking the past tense is Retrofit was acquired last year by Livongo, and Livongo has since gone public. And so I'm going to focus my comments today on what I learned about leading that virtual team. Retrofit, like I said, was very successful. We achieved the best weight loss outcomes of any weight loss program in the world, certified. So to say that you can achieve business results, you can achieve outcomes with a virtual team, I've proven it. It absolutely can be done. I have no doubt in my mind. That's not to say it's right for everybody, but everybody's now going to have to do it. And so the purpose of this call is to help you do it, to help you understand quickly so that this week you can master this. We don't have time for you to spend the next 2 months getting used to this. My goal is by Wednesday, you feel like you have those training wheels on your bike and you know how to do this. Don't take my word for it. You know, Retrofit was named Great Place to Work multiple times in Chicago and nationally, Best Place for Women to Work, and all these different awards, which I'm not going to belabor. But the great news is you can build and scale a great team. You can have great employee retention. You can have great Glassdoor scores. You can create a great place to work, even virtually. It totally can be done. But it takes leadership, and that's where you come in. You are going to be tested in this time period like never before. I think that's when we're at our best as people, especially as Americans, when we have to be forced to rise to the occasion. And whether you're starting a company and it's got 5 people and you're working virtually, whether you're leading thousands, as some of you have told me you are, whether you're leading multiple offices, multiple countries, this is what leadership is all about. These are the times that we are made and tested, and leaders are forged, and some will rise to the occasion, some will not. I would speculate that this will be the hardest leadership challenge of your career. I think we all would agree on that probably. And if you can excel and see your team, your business, and your customers through this period, you will come out on the other end, not only with a successful business, a business that remains vibrant and intact, but you will also personally experience such huge growth as a leader, because leading people is just so fulfilling in so many ways. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Now, one of my first mentors coming out of undergrad school told me this, and I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about for many years until it clicked, which is leadership is this feeling of fake it till you make it. And what that means is that, you don't get to practice leadership and then one day you become a leader. It's thrust upon you, and then you have to just kind of do it, right? And so you do fake it till you make it. And that doesn't, by fake it, I don't mean being phony or not genuine with your team. It's quite the opposite, which we'll talk about. But what I mean is you step into it with confidence in yourself that you'll figure it out. And I think you can figure this out by Wednesday, with confidence in your team that they can be led, that they will be led virtually, remotely, without seeing and touching them, without being able to watch the clock. You let go of all those things. And that is faking it with the faith that you can do it. And what happens is you quickly realize you can make it, and it totally works. But it does take that leap of faith across the chasm. And the reason I feel confident saying that, and I've seen this in so many businesses, I've worked with thousands of clients over my 25 years of hiring, is that people are resilient. People are resilient way more than we even think. Children are resilient, relationships are resilient, work teams are resilient. You have to have some faith now in your team and that you've hired well. Now, if you haven't, we have a different discussion to have, but if you've hired the right people and you give them confidence, they can do way more than you think. Now, I will caveat that with they prefer the truth. They need the truth. And that's more important now than ever before, but it's also more challenging because none of us have any answers on the future. My crystal ball is as cloudy as yours. And on a day when the stock market's down 5% day after day, on a day where clearly the health situation is going to get worse before it gets better, on days where your kids are asking you when they're going back to school. The list is endless of uncertainty. You as leader need to find that balance between telling the truth and also keeping people focused and not alarming them. And it is a fine line. And I know you'll find that line, as I will, and your people will really appreciate it. If you try to snow them or BS them or promise them things that are out of your control, which right now so much is, they're going to resent it. They're going to know you're bullshitting them. And when times do improve, they will tuck that away and remember that you failed that leadership test because you were selfish or tried to keep them focused on the task at hand and didn't allow the truth to prevail. And that's the truth about so many things, their personal situation, their worries, their fears that all of us understandably feel right now. So one of the key takeaways of this hour together, and as I said, we'll be done within an hour, is you have to let go of the innate tendency to babysit and micromanage your people. Now, some of us are micromanagers anyway. I'm a recovering micromanager. When you can see people and touch them and feel them and meet with them face to face in the office, you are able to keep those instincts at bay. When you start to work virtually and lead people virtually, when they're in their homes, you cannot see them, you cannot touch or hug them, quite literally these days. You have to let that stuff go. Don't even try to micromanage. It will completely backfire. You'll spend all your time, you'll pull all your hair out of your head. You won't achieve the business results. This is the time to lead, to have confidence that you've hired the right people, in most cases, hopefully, that they can support each other and that they are resilient. Now, when you let go of micromanaging, you're going to find it's hugely liberating for you. You get your life back. You get your time back. You have time as leader to do your job, which is thinking about, what do I need to do? What are the priorities? Where do we take this ship? And you're going to be tested like never before over the coming days, weeks, and months with changes every hour, changes every day. If you're trying to micromanage and babysit your people, you're not doing your job as leader, which is to figure out, where are we taking this ship, whether it's a department, a company, an investment fund, whatever it is. You hired them. Now is the time to trust them. And by the way, if you find that you can't, then you've some options and you've learned a valuable lesson. Look at me touching my face. If you can't, you're going to part ways with them, or you're going to demote them and have someone else micromanage them. You cannot spend your days micromanaging your people during this time. Type in the chat box if you're with me, and then we're really going to get into some of the meat of this. Just type, yes, I got it. Yes, I'm with you. Yes, I can do this. Type anything with a Y, and I'm going to take a sip of water. One of the things I learned about running an online wellness company is that water is life. Water is everything. Okay, great. Everyone's got it. Everyone's with me. Awesome. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to the next step. At Retrofit, we had an unfair advantage that you don't have. And I will admit that. Because when I started the company, I knew it was going to be a virtual company. And so we hired and recruited people who had specific characteristics. You don't have that unfair advantage. I understand you're inheriting people and thrusting them to begin working at home in a virtual environment. I still think it would be useful for you to understand what we looked for. We looked for people that didn't need to be micromanaged. There are people in this world that don't need to be micromanaged. There are others that do. I hope your team is filled with those that don't need to be micromanaged, and if not, you're going to make some changes. People that know how to focus, even under stressful circumstances. There are people that know how to focus and get shit done, and there are people that don't. They let their emotions and distractions, understandable as they may be, guide their behaviors. There are people in this world that have a propensity towards action, a get shit done mentality, which right now, for your business, any industry, any size, is going to be more important than ever. People that have the ability to prioritize, to juggle a lot of stuff, hugely important. Resourcefulness, people who you tell them where we got to go, and they find a way to figure it out. There are people in this world that are resourceful, and I found, sadly, there are people in this world that are not resourceful. And then this last one may sound very tactical, but people who can communicate well with the written word are hugely important right now. You have people on your team who are amazing at that, and I'm encouraging you to harness that, to leverage that gift they have, and others that suck at writing, and be very careful about that communication. So these are things that we looked for in hiring the 70 people at Retrofit. They were across the country. Many of them never even met, and yet we had near perfect retention. I'm encouraging you to think about all of your team, just list them all out, and think about this scorecard, if you will, these characteristics, and I'm going to send this to you, and think about which of them have these characteristics. Over the next week, you're going to learn real fast who has these characteristics and who doesn't. And these are DNA characteristics. These can't be trained or developed, right? So your people on your team are either hardwired to have these things or not. Now, leadership is all about a few things. First, setting clear expectations. Your expectations of your people have changed in the past 24 hours, let alone the past week. We have to be very honest about that. You know that. They don't know that, right? Don't assume that your people know what's in your head. You need to take a big step back, a deep breath, and assess the situation, which is fluid at best. Assess the risk, assess your cash balance, assess every piece of your business, and make the decisions just as I've made in my business over the past 2 days. But then you need to communicate to your team. And you need to do that in a differentiated way. For your junior people, setting expectations may be as simple as what your expectations are of them in terms of hours, in terms of their ability, when they're working, turnaround time, things like that, that junior people, kids right out of school, 22-year-olds that don't even know how to tie their shoes, and now they're thrust to working on their bed at home. They need expectations that are pretty junior level. And you may think, well, do I really need to tell them that? And I would say, yeah, you need to tell them that, because they've never done this before either. And they were just barely getting the ropes of what it's like to be in the work world. For your senior people, your vice presidents, your directors, the people that you count on, your expectations are totally different. You don't need to tell them those things, but you do need to tell them your expectations that they need to lead. You cannot do this alone. You need other leaders in your organization. You expect them to stay very close to their people. You expect them to over-communicate. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So differentiate, practice differentiation as you always should with your team, and think about who needs what set of expectations. They have no idea what you expect right now. And you may feel guilty, understandably, doing that right now in this time of uncertainty, this time of stress, this time of health concern, this time of kids working at home. You may say, how could I possibly burden my people with expectations? I should just leave them alone. And that's going to backfire. Your business is going to turn to shit. Your people want and crave direction and expectations. And I know that sounds unusual, but we all do. It keeps us focused, it keeps us driven, and it gives us a purpose to get up every day, when right now, some days we may not feel like doing that. So really think about that. Set clear expectations for your team, and then hold them accountable. At Retrofit, every single person in the organization, regardless of role, software developers, health consultants, dietitians, marketing people, sales, had very clear results and outcomes that were expected of them, quantified. If you haven't taken the time to quantify the results you expect of your team, now's the time to do it. And if that means you got to spitball and come up with a number and pick it out of your butt, it's better than having no quantified result or outcome that you expect. Obviously, take into account the new normal and the fact that your customers, your vendors, your suppliers, everyone in the ecosystem is affected, impacted equally by this. So take that into consideration as you form those targets. But everyone should have quantified results. Everyone in your team should also have parameters, guide rails. I don't just mean ethically, they should have those already, but what can they do? What can't they do? What do they need approval to spend? Which understandably is an issue right now as businesses contract. But what other parameters do they have? And then what timeline do they have? When do they need to get X done by what, right? So let me back up one step, right? You're setting the expectations. You're holding them accountable to a specific quantified result, and that your people understand what it is within these parameters and guide rails at this time. Now, here's the hard part. Let them figure out how to get it done. Let go. Instill confidence in them. Tell them you believe in them, that you know that they can figure out how to get it done. Say things. Use your best judgment. I trust you. These are things that, as a dad of two young kids, I'm learning how powerful those words are. Of course, I would love to tell my kids what to do. Just do it this way. Let's get it done. But it's actually far better for them to learn when I say, use your best judgment. I trust you. Support them. I love you. These are times to say that to your people, which I know sounds very strange, even coming out of my mouth, sitting here. Your people should feel confident that they should ask your forgiveness, not permission. They should get shit done. They know what needs to get done because you've set that parameter. You've set that quantified goal. Your focus should not be on micromanaging them. Your focus should not be on telling them step by step, here's what I need you to do. Do this, do this. Set them in the right direction. Know that they're going to get it, 80 or 90% of how you would have done it, and let that 10% go. This is not the time to worry about perfection. Now, of course, there are things in business that do need perfection. I understand that. Things that are customer facing or health related, of course. But in general, 80, 90% of stuff is good enough, especially in wartime conditions like these. Your focus as the leader in wartime conditions is to cut the red tape. Figure out what is holding your people back from getting those things done and removing those obstacles, because that is a full-time job by itself. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to talk about cadence. At Retrofit, we developed a very specific cadence. And by cadence, I mean a pulse of the organization. It kind of kept us moving forward and propelled us every single day. And I want to take you through a real shortcut on kind of how we did that. Before I do that, type in the chat box. Let me know you're with me. Just type yes if you're still with me. And we will proceed. Okay, everyone's still with me. A lot of yeses. Yes, all caps. Love it. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's talk about cadence. Cadence is so important. And every organization has its own cadence, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you that my cadence was the only one. But I'm just telling you that having a cadence is super useful. And a few of you have asked, will this be recorded? Yes, I'll send you the video and the deck, and you can send it to your team. But still stick with us, because I'm going to take your questions at the end, by the way. And I'm going to stay on as long as you want to ask questions. Okay, cadence. We thought of it at Retrofit as a daily, weekly, monthly cadence. And when you get into this drumbeat, it helps reassure people. I think your people are going to find it very comforting in this time of uncertainty, which you have to remember they are feeling as you and I are feeling as leaders, right? We get to fake it till we make it. They don't get to fake it. They have to actually live it. And so getting into this daily, weekly, monthly cadence worked exceptionally well for us at Retrofit. Let me give you some specifics. At the daily level, a daily stand-up of some sort was incredibly powerful. And what that looked like for us was a 15-minute stand-up video meeting at the beginning of the day with our small teams, 5 to 10 people, just like Jeff Bezos says, no more people than it takes to eat 2 pizzas. So subdivide your teams and have this daily stand-up. It's incredibly powerful. Also keeps people connected. Also, a daily note from you. Now, I'm not saying you have to write a missive every single day, right? I don't do that. Well, I do that to my followers and my list, but to your employees. But I will tell you the impact that it has is enormous. They feel connected. They understand. They feel in the loop. But here's the thing. It has to be personal. It has to be authentic. It has to be informative. It can't be blowing smoke up their ass. It can't be worrisome. It can't be distracting. It's just as long as it needs to be. People find that very useful, very comforting, and you'd be shocked. Many will actually read them. Some will actually save them. The point is, get into a daily ritual, whatever yours is. These are some that we found useful at Retrofit. Then we go to weekly. Weekly, I think, is the key, right? Daily, yeah, a lot of stuff doesn't get done in one day, but in a week, a lot of stuff gets done if you think about it. And there's a couple questions. Let me go back on the daily note. What do you say? Okay, so priorities. What's the shit we got to get done today? It could be customer updates. We just spoke to our customer and they are shifting their focus to healthcare, and they're going to be hiring 20 people over the next month. It could be you've made a promotion, right? We're promoting someone to take over this team, and here's why I'm doing it, and here's what my expectations are. It could be policy changes, right, within the company that obviously are going to happen. So whatever that is, daily is just a great frequency, but the more authenticity, the better. Let's move on to weekly. A weekly team hangout we found was very useful. A lot of times we did those on Friday afternoon, almost like a beer bash. Sometimes we actually did them with the universal lubricant of alcohol, and we would get together and talk for a half hour and shoot the shit. But most importantly is your weekly one-on-one with every single one of your direct reports. And everyone in your team must be doing one-on-one with every single direct report. These are so valuable to make people feel connected, heard, listened to, understood, so you hear the concerns. It doesn't have to be an hour. I actually think 25 minutes is the perfect length. It gives you 5 minutes to recharge before your next discussion. And importantly, what I learned at Retrofit was to let my direct report set the agenda for that time. So I didn't have an agenda. They knew that that was their protected time. And by the way, you can't be moving those time, canceling that time. That sends the wrong message to your team. But when you guard that time and lock it in, and every Tuesday at 8:30, we're going to hop on Zoom video and have our one-on-one, and you set the agenda, you being your direct report, incredibly useful. The last tool that we implemented was the weekly hot sheet. And this is worth commenting on because it was really well received. Again, I learned this from a boss of mine years ago, and I've always done them. So basically, a weekly hot sheet takes 15 minutes, and it's at the end of the week. Technically, we made it due on Saturdays in case people wanted to do it on a Saturday, but basically it's a 15-minute, and it has 3 questions. Question 1, what were their key accomplishments this week? The key things you accomplished this week. Hugely important to make people feel like they're adding value and making valuable contributions, because we get very lost in the work, hopefully. And by the end of the week, when we take a step back to reflect, wow, I actually got 4 big things done this week. Now, I don't want to know a laundry list of everything my people did every week. That's micromanaging. But if you closed a new deal, if you advanced the new deal, if you shipped a new product or went to beta or whatever it was, huge. Second big question. What are your big priorities for next week? That forces your people to think about and get ahead. What do I need to get done next week? Versus waiting till Monday morning. They wake up, they have coffee, they send the kids downstairs for their e-learning. And then they're first starting to think about, what do I got to get done this week? And third is, oh shits. What are the key things that you need me as your manager to address? Obstacles you need me to remove, red tape you need me to cut, things you need to discuss with me at our next one-on-one. So 3 sections. What'd you get done this week? What are your big priorities next week? And how can I help you? And that weekly hot sheet I implemented, every manager on my team implemented, and I didn't require them to. They found it that useful. It funneled the whole organization and bubbled up. And man, you can't not know what's going on when you implement a tool like that. Okay, let's go to monthly. Monthly, a lot of work gets done, and that's part of the challenge. Especially in this time of uncertainty, I fear that your people are going to feel disconnected and kind of lost in the fog. And subdividing work into sprints, much like software developers do, of 2 to 4 weeks is just a great chunk of time. And I've learned this from working with software developers when I lived out in Silicon Valley. You can actually get an amazing amount of code written in 2 to 4 weeks if you're a software development team. You can also move the ball forward if you're in sales in 2 to 4 weeks. You can develop a whole marketing campaign in 2 to 4 weeks. You can just get a lot of shit done in 2 to 4 weeks. So dividing work sprints into 2 to 4 week periods, more than weekly, but monthly, no more than monthly, are huge. And the reason is momentum begets momentum. Success begets success. As your team builds confidence, and by the end of this week, your team is going to feel much more confident working at home than they ever did before. So people are resilient. And by this Friday, they're going to start to refocus. They're going to say, okay, what kind of wins can we get? What kind of momentum can we get? And it's going to start to work. So those are the 3 periods to think about. Think about daily, think about weekly, think about monthly. Okay. Now, there was one quick question. Repeat the hot sheet questions again. First, what were your big accomplishments this week? What are your big priorities next week? And then, oh shit, what do you need my help with? Right? That's kind of, what do you need me to know as your boss, as your manager, as your leader? Okay, let's move on. We've talked about cadence. I want to talk about over communication. Notice I didn't title this communication. I'm talking about over communication. We learned at Retrofit. I learned at Retrofit that I needed to change my communication completely from how I did it before. Because when I led a team, when I led a company in a physical office, I could get everyone huddle around, hey, let's get a pizza and talk. Communication would happen. It just happened kind of automatically. Everyone knew what was going on, especially in a company of 50 or 100 people. Now that we're all distributed in individual homes for the foreseeable future, which, like I said, I think personally may be months, not weeks, we have to over communicate as leaders. Let me tell you what I mean and don't mean. I'm talking about repetition. I am not talking about having your people spend all day in meetings online. We won't get anything done if we do that. What do I mean by repetition? Repeating, well, take a step back. Thinking carefully about what your key messages are and repeating them over and over and over again. Repeating them so many times that you want to puke on the words the 10th time you say it, because you're like, do I really need to repeat this again? And the answer is usually yes, you do. You need to repeat it in different mediums, in different forms, in different ways, over and over and over again. But I'm not talking about spending all day in meetings. When you repeat those key messages over and over, people say, oh, I get it, right? This is finally getting through. You have to remember, you're the leader. Your people hear so much stuff thrown at them from so many different directions, not to mention the media, their kids, the schools, all the noise that we all have in our life right now, understandably. So little is going to get through that brain. And so you need to take advantage of over communication, your key messages over and over. Whenever you're tempted to send them a message, I would encourage you to think twice. And I got this feedback. It was pretty tough feedback from my team when we started Retrofit. I was communicating too many things. And I would send a gazillion emails a day. And as a workaholic micromanager, I would be up at night and they'd wake up and they'd have 30 emails from me. And we did an intervention and I had to begin to think twice before hitting send. And I'm encouraging you to do the same. Focus on the key messages over and over. People can only absorb so much, especially in this time of stress and uncertainty and worry. Let them focus. Now, you need to help them figure out what to focus on, but then let them get their stuff done, which frees you up from micromanaging to get your stuff done, which is leading. The 10th time you say it is the very first time that someone on your team has heard it. I can assure you, I've learned this the hard way. I've said a few things and then people will say, oh, I didn't know that. I'd be like, are you serious? I've said it twice today. You got to say it over and over and over. And by the way, not just verbally, but in writing and verbal and video and email and text, using all these different medium to make sure that your team is in complete lockstep, complete alignment. So to that end, let's talk about communications. There are so many tools now for communications. I'm not going to bore you on this webinar with all these tools, right? We all know what they are. The observation we had from Retrofit is there's too many. And we agreed on a standard list of what are our tools. I don't even care what tools you pick. Pick a few, but don't pick all of them, right? You need an email platform and a video platform and a texting, messaging, blah, blah, blah. Pick them and agree on those or mandate them. But then, regardless of which ones you pick, you need rules of the road on how to use them. For example, at Retrofit, we said that you needed a text if it was really hot. So if it was really time sensitive, you'd use text. If it wasn't, you'd use email. And people would check email a couple times a day, right? 2-3 times a day, which I'm a huge fan of. And that's really important right now, because if you don't have those rules of the road, I can assure you your people are going to be sitting at home just reading every email. That's how they're going to spend their time. Not getting shit done, but reading email. And so figure out, how are we going to communicate time-sensitive things? How are we going to communicate non-time sensitive? So asynchronous and synchronous. Think about the difference between those two, okay? When things go askew, which they do, and we found this at Retrofit, and you find this email shit goes back and forth, after 2 times, we had a rule: stop the email, pick up the phone, right? To resolve the discrepancy or the difference of opinion or whatever it may be, or miscommunication, which is going to happen. You don't want your people spending all their day articulating things so carefully in an email to craft it to clarify something when a quick phone call would resolve it. One more thing on this. And again, writing skills come in hugely important here. And many on your team probably don't have great writing skills, especially math folks, data folks, some engineers, etc. Unlike maybe your sales and marketing folks. Teach them, train them to start with the question. Start with the headline. Give me the headline first, and then give me all the backstory. Especially junior people, think about it with your kids. They come to you, and they're all excited, and they got a problem, and I'm going to tell you the story, and they tell you the story, and they tell you the story, and you're like, get to the point. What is the friggin' question? I've had to train my team to do the same thing, and you'll save yourself a ton of time, and you will teach them and force them on that discipline that they can implement with their team, which is start with the headline. And I don't mean the subject line. I mean, start with, is this a question? Is there an FYI? Is the sky about to fall? Like, what is the point here? And then give me all the backstory and the data. Okay, some other things on communication. Your focus as leader is to facilitate communication in every conceivable way so that your team feels over-communicated to. And again, over-communication in the right way, not the wrong way. To help you, I would encourage you to appoint a communications champion on your team. Think about who on your team is just a natural, great communicator. They're a great writer. They're a great leader, and give them a battlefield promotion. It's a great career recognition, maybe if you're an up-and-comer, to make them your communications champion. This is the person who you encourage them to think about ways to enhance and build communication on your team using every medium at your disposal. And there are infinite, from live video and recorded videos of you and email and text, and the list is endless, dashboard, metrics. But you have someone on your team, you just got to figure who it is, who just has an innate way of doing that. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the most popular cheerleader. It's the person who just has a way of communicating, and get them involved in helping you. Part of that communication has to be with the people that you've hired in the past week or month or 3 months. So make a list today of who those people are. They need extra time and attention from you or someone on your team. You got to finish getting them ramped up because they're not there yet, right? And it's easy to lose sight of that. You worked so hard to hire them. Make sure that they get ramped up. I'm going to take a sip of water, type in the chat box. We're in the home stretch. I got a bunch more content, and we got 15 minutes to do it. So type in the chat box, yes, if you're still with me, if you can do this. I hope you're finding it useful. I know some of these sound pretty obvious. I can't implore what my learning curve was. It was really, really hard. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. So let's keep going. Thank you for all your yeses. Okay. Here's a big one. It is going to be such a natural tendency for your people to hunker down right now. We're all in this hunker down mentality, which I understand as a parent. A fiance, I have health concerns, my family, etc. So easy to look inward. You need to make sure your team is looking outward to your customers, to your clients. More than ever, you need to be all over them. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Finding new ways to serve them, to help them through this uncertainty. Some of your clients are going to be going through repositioning, shifting their focus, layoffs, cutbacks, new products, all kinds of things. It creates great opportunity. Do it from a position of strength and opportunity, not a position of fear. The reason I'm reminding you as leader is that your people will forget. They'll forget the outside world. They're tuning it out right now. They're focusing on their kids, understandably. You have to focus on your customers. If you don't, someone else will. Find new ways to serve them. What else can we do to be helpful? It's times like this where new breakthroughs come. These are the things that these are the time periods that innovations come. Make sure that your team is doing that. Now, I want to talk about the home office. Oh my God, the home office. I included this picture because some of your people are working like this right now. Okay. You have to understand that. You may have a home office. You may have a desk. Many of them don't. Especially younger employees, new employees just out of school. They have a studio place where the sink and the bathroom and a bed, right? And you're expecting them to stay focused and get work done during this period. So we need to talk about that for a minute. We found at Retrofit, it was vital to have a dedicated workspace, whatever it was. Obviously, we couldn't afford, to move people to a bigger apartment or a bigger house. But within that house, we would help them create a dedicated workspace. Give your people $50, $100 to order a desk on Amazon or go to IKEA. And for God's sakes, a comfortable chair, since we're all going to be sitting on our butts for the foreseeable future. They need a dedicated workspace, a space that lets them separate personal and work life. It's important mentally, let alone from a productivity standpoint. We found these distractions at Retrofit. The TV was probably the biggest one. And we had a no TV rule. Keep your TV off. So easy right now to keep CNN on, to keep CNBC on. Don't do it. It's a slippery slope. Make sure your people aren't doing it. Also, the fridge. People will eat out of worry. Those of us that are inclined to eat, binge eat and worry eat, which is what I do. So other people don't eat. They stop eating. I eat. That's a huge distraction. And it's okay to talk with your people about these distractions. Talk with your people. Hey, Frank, send me a picture of your workspace so I can give you some ideas on how to set it up. You could have a competition amongst your team. Hey, everyone post your photo of your home office, your workspace. Give your people $50, $100, best investment you ever made. Now, the piece that is difficult is their kids are home. My kids are home for the foreseeable future. I personally predict schools will be canceled for this year, which is 2 months. They're going to be e-learning, whatever that means. And your team has their kids at home, their dog at home. You need to be cognizant that these kids and Fido are going to pop up on videos from time to time. Please understand that, right? Focus on the task at hand. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. Your people are focused. Help them focus on a space, but give them some understanding that they have a life to lead. There was a question, how did we message on the no TV rule? We had a message, no TV. We kind of said during business hours, keep the TV off, keep the fridge closed, keep a huge bottle of water with you at all times. You got to stay hydrated. Huge issue. I know that sounds ridiculous. And we're going to talk about health in a minute. Let's talk about technology first. And I actually want to get to health. So we learned these things at Retrofit. And I'm not an IT expert, but these are things you need to make sure today that your tech team is ready. Number one, make sure your people have enough internet connectivity. That means enough bandwidth in the company to handle all your folks dialing in remotely, and also at the home level that they have enough bandwidth. Some of your folks, some of your junior folks, where money's more constrained, they may be on the cheapest Comcast plan or the cheapest Uverse plan, and they don't have enough bandwidth to get their work done. I pay at home. I'm fortunate, you might be too, to pay a little bit extra to get more bandwidth, especially if there's videos involved. So make sure your people have enough bandwidth at home. And there's online tests, speedtest.net, that you can have your people run, send you the data or your tech team, and just pay the money for the next few months to make sure your people have enough bandwidth. Security, obviously, a ton of security issues working from home. You're not going to be able to lock it down 100%, but we did some very basic things at Retrofit that were not overly expensive. Make sure your team is doing that. And here's a crucial one. There are going to be a large number of tech support issues especially over the next week. Make sure your tech team is on standby. Pay them extra if you have to. Reward them if you have to. Find a way that they can handle all these tech issues that your people are going to have working from home. I'm not able to dial in. My bandwidth is an issue. I've got a security setup issue. I forgot my password. Set up urgency tiers, right? 3 urgency tiers: red, yellow, green. Red, I can't get my work done. Green is like, when you get a chance, can you help me figure out my outside monitor or whatever? Maybe their printer's not working, etc. So don't underestimate the tech tools not the tech tools you got to put in place, but the tech support. Let's keep going. You're going to need tools to document stuff. This is a time when your team's not co-located, to really document your processes and client information. This is actually hugely valuable to your business. It's the intellectual property of your business. Training your people to document stuff and use, whether it's Google Docs or Dropbox or whatever it is that you're using. Setting up a task management system is a great way to keep your team focused. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to spend time going through them. Pick one that works for you and go with it. We used Trello, but there's many others. And of course, chat and email, but God forbid your team spends all day long on chat and email. They won't get their stuff done. So giving them permission, check your email twice a day. I just want you to check email twice a day. If it's urgent, I will call you, I will text you, I will chat you, but don't spend all day long on email. What we learned at Retrofit, if you can take away one thing from this webinar, is that during this time of social distancing, people still need to feel emotionally connected. Social distancing is such a bad term, but we're not going to change it. I think of it as physical distancing, but we're humans first, and your people need to feel emotionally connected to you, to each other, to your customers, to having a reason to wake up in the morning, especially if they're single and don't have a family, don't have roommates. It's pretty isolating. And I'm going to touch on that too before we finish. Video, just like you see me in this video and you feel more connected to me somehow, God forbid, looking at this face. You feel like you know me, like you trust me, like we're in this together. I use Zoom. I'm not here to plug Zoom or sell you anything. There's no sales pitch here. But whether it's Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, FaceTime, we used video at Retrofit to scale that company. I don't know how we would have done it without video. We could have gone without any other tool. So the reason is a couple fold, and they may seem obvious, but 90% of communication is nonverbal, and all that goes away, even on the phone. So when on video, at least we can preserve that. Then there's just the comfort of who you're talking to. And then there's also, when we're having a debate or a discussion or a team meeting, being able to see someone, immediately who's talking. So using this screen, there's 15 people, 25 people there. But if I can see who's talking, my brain can focus on what they're saying, not, who is that again? When you get on a phone call with 25 people and everyone's talking, it's just really hard to do. So video saved our ass, and I hope you'll invest in video. It's huge. Now, there's a quick question. How do you tell people how to work in their own homes? Should you dictate it? No, you're not telling them how to work in their own homes as much as you're asking them, what do you need from me as your leader to be as productive as possible? And here are some best practices, and you can share the ones we've talked about today. And part of that means a dedicated workspace. I mean, this is data backed, right? Scientists have found you need a dedicated workspace. You should be bringing your phone to your bedside, your laptop, sitting on your bed. It's not going to work, right? Doesn't work. Video works so much better than audio. And if you jump into it and try it for a week, I think you'll understand what I mean. I don't want to belabor it. I do want to talk about health, and I know this sounds pretty silly, but I ran Retrofit, which was a wellness and weight loss company, and so we were very focused on health. But this is a good reminder for you as a leader that your team are people first, their employees second. And I would predict that social distancing is going to lead to a lot of side effects or side issues amongst your team that you have to watch out for. Depression, anxiety, isolation, burnout, especially with extroverts. And that's not a judgment of introverts, extroverts. I'm an introvert. An extrovert, just as a reminder, doesn't mean you're a salesperson. An extrovert means you derive your energy from other people. Well, when we're cut off from other people, extroverts shrivel. They don't know what to do. Introverts might like it. So especially your extroverts, you need to be looking out for these signs of depression and anxiety and stress and get them help. Now, I'm not encouraging you to play psychologist, but you got to stay close to your people. There are amazing video-based therapy companies. BetterHelp is one, and there's a bunch of others. They're phenomenal. They use video. They have a huge network of thousands of licensed experts on all kinds of issues. If your people don't have mental health, they can't work. They can't get their stuff done. So please stay attuned to this. And at Retrofit, we used yoga and meditation quite a bit. And I know that sounds silly for some of you, but I'm a huge believer, and I do it myself. Physical health. Your people were not designed to sit all day long. We were not designed to sit all day long. And really scary for some of your employees, going to the office was the only movement they got all day. And that is now gone. So it's very easy for your people, for their physical health to suffer right now, especially under time of stress. They're not sleeping. They're worried about the next paycheck. They're worried, are you going to lay them off? You need to ensure their mental health and physical health. It's the base of the Maslow pyramid. As leader, it's your job to make sure it happens. One way we did that at Retrofit was to encourage our people, to almost force them to get offline. And we busted their chops if they were online during those times. I want you to get outside and breathe and walk. And fortunately, with coronavirus, one of the things that we can do with social distancing is be outside, which is great. And taking walks, maybe even together, or walking meetings, taking scheduled breaks, hugely important. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that are popping up. So are there concerns of using video for work that exacerbate bandwidth issues? Yes. You'll need to decide, if the kids streaming Netflix and content for school is going to cause an issue with using Zoom for work. In my experience, those have been so improved from even 2 years ago. So if you haven't tried it recently, try it. You're probably going to find it's not as much of an issue as you thought. The optimization, the video technology, even on this call, is much better than it used to be. And when in doubt, give your people 10, 20, 30 bucks a month stipend to increase their bandwidth at home. Totally worth it. There was another question. Is it beneficial to have certain blocks of time when there's no team meetings? I love that idea. I love it. We did that at Retrofit. Certain times were protected as work time. And on that topic, by the way, you're going to need to think carefully, maybe have your communications champion that we talked about, think about when to have meetings, right? Because if people are distributed across many time zones, many countries, states, it's an issue. Now, I just want to do a time check. I'm going to stay on as long as you guys want. We have 5 minutes left. I am going to open it up to questions. I'm almost done. There's a question about balancing kids at home at work. It's new. What do you think we should be considering? Andrew, if I had the answers, I would tell you, I'm in the same situation. I think most schools are going to quickly this week go to e-learning, which means the kids are going to have certain assignments, certain videos, certain expectations during times. I think that's what most are going to go to. But as it comes to being a leader, whether you have kids or not, understanding that for your people, their children are going to come first. That is the reality that we're dealing with. And that means understanding, do your people have kids? Which I know is crazy, right? What are their kids' names? Are they in school? Are they not? All your responsibility as leader. There are some great tools that we used at Retrofit to keep a pulse on our team. One was Tiny Pulse, and that lets you weekly keep tabs on how people are feeling and doing. It was a godsend for me. And Know Your Team is the other one. So I'd encourage you to check those out. But basically, every week it sends all your people like one question, and they can reply, and it's anonymous, and it gives you a pulse check on how the organization is feeling and doing. Implement that today. for your team. It costs almost nothing. There's some other things we learned about keeping their head in the game that I implemented at Retrofit. These sound obvious, but to some of your people, they won't be, like getting dressed, keeping a regular schedule. When someone's unemployed and they're a job seeker, just getting dressed and keeping a regular schedule every day, things like that make a huge difference. It's no different for your team. One of the things that we implemented that works really well is working for 25 minutes and taking a 5-minute break, or working for 50 minutes and taking a 10-minute break. But every hour you have to structure in some time to breathe, to stretch, to get up from the desk, to take a sip of water, to go to the bathroom. So you're not trying to take a leak on a conference call, for God's sakes. Things like that make a huge difference in keeping your people focused. Your job as leader right now is to keep your people's head in the game and keep them engaged. And that means remembering that they are people first and employees second. Have some empathy. Think about their kids. Understand that they are stressed out. Your boss is going to be putting pressure on you for results. I can understand that. That's the joy of being a middle manager. You are the shock absorber. You take the stress from your boss, your board, your investors. That's what I've done my whole career. And you filter it out. You meditate. You practice yoga. You breathe. You think of your key messages and you absorb that stress. That is your job as leader, to keep your people focused and as unstressed as possible. And communicate up the chain what you're doing, all these things that we're talking about, so that your leader, your boss, your manager, your CEO, your board, your VCs, whoever they are, understand that you are stepping up as leader. You're going to get a ton of recognition one day, but you're also going to get a ton of leeway because your boss knows you're on this. We did some other things at Retrofit that were incredibly powerful. They were really small: virtual happy hours, online book clubs, and assigning a one-on-one buddy. This is huge. Making sure every single person on your team has a buddy assigned, and they're checking in with each other. They're the first person that person goes to for help. Because maybe that person's dealt with it before. So it's not a mentor, but it's just a one-on-one buddy, and they should be checking in. In addition to that, making sure that everyone on your team, in your entire organization, is part of a small group. That could be 5 to 10 people, kind of that pizza rule, right? How many people it takes to eat 2 pizzas, and celebrating wins, no matter how small right now. And I know there are going to be days where we all feel like there's not a lot of wins. Searching for those wins that you can celebrate with your team and over-communicating those to give hope, to give optimism that your team is doing this for a reason. It's really easy to forget that. So before we wrap up and open it up to questions, I'm going to go through just the key things that I learned in scaling a 100% virtual company. I hope this has been useful so far. Your people are going to love this once they get into a groove. The majority of them may never want to come back to the office, and I don't want you to be afraid of that possibility. You don't have to worry about it right now, but this is so liberating to them, to you, to not spend 2 hours commuting, to be able to watch their kids as opposed to worrying about childcare, to work in the manner that they find works best to get the shit done. You agree on the parameters, you tell them the time frame, the resources, and they figure it out. They may never want to come back. If you're struggling to trust someone on your team, you kind of already have your answer. What we found at Retrofit was that when we did make a hiring mistake, and of course it happens, no one's perfect, and I've been at it 25 years in hiring, and you're going to make mistakes, you already have your answer. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? Do you want to micromanage them? No. So put them under someone else for the time being and let them micromanage them, or begin the process of parting ways with them, maybe move them to a consultant status and offboard them, of course, as humanely and gracefully as possible. But if you can't trust them, it's never going to work, and you're wasting your time worrying about it, because you're about to find out who on your team is resourceful. And that characteristic in an uncertain time like this it's like a startup, right? I've started 4 companies, and every time I hire someone who's just resourceful, who gets shit done, who figures stuff out, that characteristic is invaluable to carry an organization. And yes, they may do it 90% of the way you would have done it. For God's sake, don't critique them on the 10%. Let it go, right? Unless it's something that has to be fixed and perfect. Not everything does, but you're about to find out who that is. Champion them, reward them, encourage them, tell them in your weekly one-on-ones. For people that are not resourceful, that can't figure it out, that are taking too much time, too much mind share, either part ways with them or demote them, put them under someone else, let them be micromanaged until you can part ways. The key thing I learned about retrofit that I think is really useful right now is that facilitating social connection of your team is the hardest part of your job. Your people have to feel connected. We all want to feel connected to something bigger than us. And that is what leadership is all about. Don't worry about them not working. You should actually be more worried about them overworking and burning out. And think about it. Your people right now have no boundaries. They're at home. They're working on their bed. They're worried you're about to lay them off or scale back their hours. They're going to work their ass off in many cases, too much. You should worry more about them overworking than underworking. And I know that takes a leap of faith, but go with me on it. That's what I found in scaling retrofit. Rahm Emanuel, who was the former mayor of Chicago, probably never said it better than this. You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do. We are in a crisis. I'm not going to bullshit you. I appreciate the time that you're spending with me. Don't let the crisis define you. Use it as an opportunity to get the most out of your people, to inspire them, to lead them, to develop them, to instill confidence in them. By the way, in your kids too. It's really not that different. And I think that quote resonates really well. One of the most liberating things we learned at Retrofit, which was great, is that you can hire the best people regardless of where they live. You're no longer captive to hiring people in your team, in your city, in your town. You can now hire the best. We hire the best software developers, the best marketers, the best sales reps, the best dietitians and therapists across the country in all these states. And by the way, they were a lot less expensive in many cases than they were in the major cities. This opens the door to you to build a world-class team. And the last idea I'll share with you is that we are quickly going to find ourselves in an economic downturn. Whenever that happens, and it's happened to me 3 times in my career of recruiting, you're going to find you have the chance to upgrade the talent on your team, really for the first time in the past 5 years. So think about who on your team you've been struggling with, and you really want to upgrade that talent. Now's a chance to do that. Now, I promised you there's no sales pitch, and I'm not going to make one, but I do have a low-cost service called Shortlist, and I'll just tell you about it here. If you want more information, go to startmyshortlist.com. But we introduce you to 10 qualified candidates in 10 days. It's a money-back guarantee, and right now I've made it $1,000. So this is not a time when companies have a lot of money for headhunters. I understand that. I think you could love Shortlist and benefit from it. We can even look for people that have experience working from home and remotely. So you may want to think about that. So startmyshortlist.com. Now, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'll stay as long as you want. Just type your questions in the chat box. You also have my email address, and I'm more than happy to answer some of your questions. Just type them right in the chat box. How do I, here's the question. How do I communicate up the chain that my deliveries may be late? In other words, resetting expectations. Again, it's about over communicating up. So when you're getting direction, mandates, changes from your boss, your leader, your investors, you can't just take that shit and funnel it downward and bang harder on people, especially in a time like this. It's going to blow up. You're the shock absorber. You decide as leader what key messages do get through, what you need to talk about upward, and say, folks, this is not going to happen. This is not realistic. Here's what we're seeing. Or to do this, I can do it, but here's what else is going to have to move. There's a trade-off. We're going to have to push this back, or I'm going to need other resources. And give those choices to your manager, to your boss, to your investors. Say, here's my plan. What you're asking is not going to happen. I can make it happen. Here's what it's going to take. That is the problem-solving, resourceful mentality that I'm talking about. The next question was, talk about small groups a little more. Are they different than natural work teams? Yes. We found at Retrofit that small groups kind of emerged. And if we could facilitate that, it helped a lot. It could be small groups on a particular passion topic. People that do yoga formed a small group. That wasn't a work group. That wasn't like all marketing or engineering. You have your functional team, but then forming small groups around topics, around social events. We had a Friday afternoon kind of, wine where we'd have wine spritzers together. We had a book club. So finding any opportunity for small groups, training and development is huge, right? Use this as an opportunity to train and develop your people when they are going to have to be resourceful and figure shit out. YouTube and other videos and online courses, and there's a ton of them. I have an online course. Everyone has an online course. Helping your people facilitate that and move to online education. How big is Retrofit? Is there a point where it doesn't scale? When we sold the business, it was about 70 people. It's now part of Livongo, which went public and is much, much bigger. And they do the same thing. They have a huge, huge virtual workforce. There are companies like GitHub and others that if you study them, they have thousands of employees worldwide, and it scales beautifully. But here's the thing. It takes that leap of faith that I've talked about earlier. It takes you letting go, not trying to micromanage and trying to reel it in. When you try to do that, it doesn't breathe. It doesn't work. You have to let go. Now, that does mean you need to hire the right kind of people who can do this, but you can't do that right now. You're stuck with the team you're stuck with, and I get that. You're about to find out who's resourceful and who can do it. Next question. How do you get one-on-ones started? So let's be clear. There's two kind of one-on-ones. There's you with every single person on your team. That should be a standing weekly protected time. Wednesday at 4:30. We're going to get together on Zoom for 30 minutes or 25 minutes. The one-on-one pairs, the buddies that I talked about, we assign them. I like that idea, and I've done it in other companies that started too, because you could think about who had similar characteristics, personality, that they could communicate well. We could assign a senior person and a junior person. So yeah, we actually assigned them. If you don't have time, you could have one on your team, assign them randomly, but I would do it in the next 48 hours. Makes people feel really confident to have someone that they can go to with questions. And especially your newer people, they still have a ton of questions just about how to get stuff done in your company. Now they can't just walk down the hall and ask you. And as their boss, as their leader, they don't want to come to you with every question. And because they don't want to be a nudnik or a nuisance, they don't want you to think less of them. And so the worst part is they hunker down and shit doesn't get done. So you want someone that it goes to. Okay, I'm going to wrap it there. Any questions? Let me know. You've got my email address. If you are interested in shortlist, go to startmyshortlist.com. It is 10 days. I'll introduce you to 10 great candidates for $1,000. You can't beat that with a stick. And I'm more than happy to be helpful to you in any way that I can. I wish you Godspeed. I know this is a stressful time for all of us. And all I can say is best of luck, and hang in there, and preserve your sense of optimism, because your people need it. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. Tell your team to do the same. I wish you the best.